disagreement here from one person to the next, from Dr. Fauci to Dr. Redfield to the president. I think that that's actually a positive. That informs a decision that can help across the board.
You heard Dr. Fauci earlier this week in an Associated Press interview say that he was disturbed by the flat-out opposition in some parts of the country to wear masks. His message lately has been go back to the basics, engage in social distancing, 6 feet apart, wear your masks. On the vaccine development, he seems optimistic. He says this in his prepared testimony: the rigorous clinical testing required to establish vaccine safety and efficacy means that it might take some time for a licensed SARS-CoV-2 vaccine to be available to the general public, but there is growing optimism that one or more of these vaccine candidates will prove safe and effective by late 2020 or early 2021. He's still talking about possibly seeing one that can work by the end of this year, Doctor.
I think he's a very cautious person, and I've interviewed him on this exact issue multiple times, and that absolutely breeds confidence. He's not going to stick his neck out on this, and we've looked at the science on this. The candidates are emerging. They're showing great antibody response, by the way, in terms of immunity, Sandra. The question is, when they are given to 30,000 people, will you see the protection against the virus itself? And in primates, we've already seen that in a couple of candidates. So I think there's scientific reason for his optimism there. In terms of masking, by the way, the key is the hot spots. In hotspots, young people are spreading this. We're seeing in a new study from JAMA Pediatrics that there's a lot of virus in the upper noses of young children. Young people are spreading this, so masking becomes more and more important, and social distancing, especially in the hotspots, the emerging hotspots now in the Midwest.
You know, Dr. Siegel, I'm sure you walk around and you get this question too, but there's so many people who are still so surprised at how difficult it is to get a test and how long it takes to get the results of that test, even if you are able to get one. Where are we with testing in this country? You're about to hear those medical experts grilled on our country's response and ability to test those individuals that want one.
That's been inadequate from the beginning. Even with over 50 million tests done to date, it's been inadequate. And the second point you made is the key, the delay in getting the results. Sandra, if it takes me 3 or 4 days or 5 days to know whether I have it or not, I don't know whether to isolate. I may have come in contact with other people. Speeding up the rapidity of this, when we have a test out there that can give you a result in 15 minutes, that's a huge problem, and a lot of attention is being paid to that. You're going to see that addressed by Admiral GIROIR today. One of the answers is something called antigen testing. They're starting to roll out antigen testing where you can test an entire group of people at the same time. That's what we do with flu. You walk into my office, I test your flu, I tell you 10 minutes later on a rapid test whether you have a positive or not. We have the technology to do that for COVID-19, for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We don't have it in place yet. I've been told over and over it's going to be in place. That has to happen before we hit the fall. There's no question. I think Admiral GIROIR is optimistic about this, so I'm interested to hear what he says at the hearing. He will be grilled on this exact question.
And of course, saving lives, safety of the American people come first in all of this, Dr. Siegel. But Dr. Redfield is also expected to address what he has been addressing recently, and the risks of not getting young people back to school, not getting them back into social environments or sports or the like, talking about the rising suicide rate. What are we hearing about that, and what medical...
Very clear approach to basing decisions on data and taking a statewide approach. There's a lot we don't know about schools, and let's be frank, we're going to have to learn what works. New York is fortunate in that we have a much, much lower rate of virus than most of the country, but it's still out there. We're not out of the woods yet. We've got to be careful. Now, what you do in response to a single case or a cluster of cases is going to depend on school environment, on policies. It's important to have that plan well in advance. It's one of the 8 key things we outlined that schools need to do if they hope to be able to reopen safely, to plan for cases, because there will be cases. Whether you've got a shot for a day or 3 days or 2 weeks, that's something that really has to be thought through carefully. There are adaptations in the school, like moving in pods or cohorts of students, so that if one class gets it, it doesn't spread to the whole school. That kind of adaptation is really quite important.
I want to talk vaccines for a moment. That is obviously what we're all hoping for the most. We learned this morning that the Trump administration will invest another $2 billion towards another possible vaccine. The money is going to fund clinical trials and secure 100 million doses of that vaccine if it's successful. Do you think the administration is on the right track when it comes to long-term solutions?
Well, it's absolutely the case that we should be doing everything possible to get safe and effective vaccines. And it's encouraging that the studies suggest that some of the vaccines out there are getting an immune response. But Stephanie, there's three things we still don't know. Does it work in people? Is it safe? Can we get it to people? And for each of those three things, there's a series of things we have to do. We have to know how well it protects, how many people, for how long. We have to really look carefully at safety, because a lot of the bad disease from COVID isn't from the virus. It's from our immune reaction to the vaccine caused some of that. I don't want to be alarmist, but we have to be completely honest with the American people. That's a risk. We need to look at it. And third, will we be able to get it into people? And that means not just can we make it and transport it and deliver it, but will people trust? And that trust has to be maintained using the Federal Advisory Committee, FDA and CDC, that have looked at every vaccine we use.
I know, Dr.
Members who are not wearing a face covering are not permitted to remain in the hearing room and will not be recognized to speak. Let me also make a few reminders about hybrid hearings. For those members appearing in person, you will be able to see members appearing remotely on the two monitors in front of you. On one monitor, you will see all the members.
Rheumatoid arthritis.
Text me first.
Cool. And speaking of partners in crime,
During these uncertain times, it's inspiring to see our communities come together,
including members who are appearing remotely. For those members appearing remotely, you can also see each person speaking during the hearing mode, as long as you have your WebEx set to active speaker mode. If you have any questions about this, please contact committee staff immediately. Let me also remind everyone of the House procedures that apply to hybrid hearings. Let me also remind everyone of the House procedures that apply to hybrid hearings. For members appearing in person, a timer is visible in the room directly in front of you. For those who may be remote, we have a timer that should be visible on your screen when you're in the active speaker with thumbnail mode and you have the timer pinned. For members who may be appearing remotely, a few other reminders. The House rules require that we see you, so please have your cameras turned on at all times, not background noise and feedback. I will recognize members verbally, and members retain the right to seek recognition verbally. In regular order, members will be recognized in seniority order for questions. If you are remote and want to be recognized outside of regular order, you may identify that in several ways. You may use the chat function to send a request. You may send an email to the majority staff. Or you may unmute your mic to seek recognition. Obviously, we do not want people talking over each other, so my preference is that members use the chat function or email to facilitate formal verbal recognition. Committee staff will ensure that I am made aware of the request and I will recognize you. As members of the committee are likely aware, we expect votes to be called in the middle of this hearing. Out of respect for members and witnesses' time, and because of the long duration of each vote during this public health emergency, I do not plan to recess the hearing at any time. Committee members, including those who are recognized for questions while the vote is ongoing, will have sufficient time to step out of the hearing, cast their vote, and return to the hearing. We will begin this hearing in just a moment when they tell me they are ready to begin the live stream. The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, do protests increase the spread of the virus?
Do protests increase the spread of the virus? I think I can make a general statement.
Well, 500,000 protesters on June 6th alone.
Yeah.
I'm just asking that number of
No.
people. Does
Yeah.
it increase the spread of the virus?
Crowding together, particularly when you're not wearing a mask, contributes to the spread of the virus.
Should we limit the protesting?
I'm not sure what you mean. How do we say limit the protesting?
Should government limit the protesting?
I don't think that's relevant to.
Well, you just said if it increases the spread of the virus, I'm just asking, should we limit it?
Well, I'm not in a position to determine what the government can do in a forceful way.
Well, you make all kinds of recommendations. You
No.
make comments on dating, on baseball, on everything
No.
you can imagine. I'm just asking, you just said
Yeah.
that protests increase the spread.
No.
I'm just asking you, should we try to limit the protests?
No, I think I would leave that to people who have more of a position to do that. I can tell you.
Government
that-
stopping people from going to church, Dr. Fauci.
Yeah.
Last week in the Calvary Chapel case, 5 liberals on the Supreme Court said it was okay for Nevada to limit church services. Justice Gorsuch said it best. He said there's no world in which the Constitution permits Nevada to favor Caesar's Palace over Calvary Chapel. I'm just asking, is there a world where the Constitution says you can favor one First Amendment liberty, protesting,
Right.
over another, practicing your faith?
I'm not favoring anybody over anybody. I'm just making a statement that's a broad statement that avoid crowds of any type, no matter where you are, because that leads to the acquisition and transmission. And I don't judge one crowd versus another crowd. When you're in a crowd, particularly if you're not wearing a mask, that
But
induces the spread.
it's a simple question, doctor. Should we limit the protests? Government is obviously limiting people
Yeah.
going to church. And look,
I'm not.
there's been no violence that I can see at church. I haven't seen people during a church service go out and harm police officers or burn buildings. But we know that, for 63 days, 9 weeks, it's been happening in Portland.
Right. Yeah.
Well, one night in Chicago, 49 officers were injured. But no limit to protests. But boy, you can't go to church on Sunday.
I don't know how many times I can answer that. I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm just going to tell you.
You've opined on a lot of things, Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, but I've never
This
said
is something that
limiting.
directly impacts the spread of the virus, and I'm asking your position on the protest.
Yeah, I'm not going to opine on limiting anything. I'm telling you what it is, the danger. And you can make your own conclusion about that. You should stay away from crowds, no matter where the crowds are.
Government has stopped people from going to work. In fact, just in New Jersey 4 days ago, Ian Smith, Frank Trombetta were arrested for trying to operate their business, their gym.
Crying in court, and
that worked?
Yep, it worked.
You got any tears?
Able to forge ballots, they'll forge them, they'll do whatever they have to do. People should go and they should vote, or do an absentee ballot.
So we do the security.
Say it.
The military predominantly votes by mail or absentee.
Absentee.
And so
You didn't understand me. I said absentee ballots are actually a very good thing. Absentee ballots are secure and they're very good. But universal mail-in are a disaster. You're going to see an election and we're going to do very well in the election. Nobody wants that date more than me. I wish we'd move it up, okay? Move it up. But you're not prepared for what they're doing. And they're using COVID, they're using the China virus. China must be very happy about it because they hit us with a virus and now they screw up an election like you will never see. You watch what happens. I don't think you'll ever give me any statement. I guess Trump was right, but the people know I'm right. Watch what happens. New York City has a little election. We just talked. You got to see. Do you know how far they're never going to have the result of that election? Never the correct result. They'll probably announce something at some point. But when did that take place? Like 5-6 weeks ago. Absentee ballots, great. Going to the polls, great. If you do universal mail-ins with millions and millions of ballots, you're never going to know what the real result of an election is. It's going to be a very, very sad day for our country. Go ahead.
sir.
If the system is a disaster, as we say, why not commit to putting in resources to
Oh,
fix it?
we're putting in all the resources you can, but as a couple of the radical left people said, you know, who actually agree with me, they said, no matter what you do, we're not prepared for this. They're not prepared for an onslaught of millions of ballots pouring in. They're not prepared. They're not prepared. You watch. They're not going to announce anything on November 3rd. They're not going to announce it on the 4th or the 5th or the 6th. It'll go on forever. People should go. You know, they voted Mick during World War I. They voted during World War II. They went to the polls. They voted. They went to their booth, and they voted proudly. But now with COVID, they don't want to vote. It's not they don't want to vote. This will be catastrophic for our nation. And you'll see it. I'm always right about things like this. I guess I must be. I wouldn't be sitting here. Yes, Jennifer, go ahead. You want something? Jennifer, did you want? Okay. Yeah, please, in the back.
What's your decision to delay the election in Hong Kong? What is your opinion?
I want to right now focus on this election. I'll have a statement about that soon. I heard that they did the delay in Hong Kong, and we'll have a statement about that, but I want to focus on it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And there we have it. There is the president. Basically, he was making comments from this police event after the National Association of Police Organizations endorsed him last month. But much of the conversation obviously led toward the voting and what he calls would be a disaster. Universal mail-in votes, those ballots, he believes could potentially be the worst election problem in history. He talked about absentee ballots being a great thing. And also people heading to the polls. We've got Chief White House correspondent John Roberts live again with us. John, he's very, very adamant that absentee ballots are the way to go, but that the universal mail-ins could potentially be a disaster. Maybe we could outline for our viewers the difference. There is a very big difference between these two methods of voting.
There is, but the way that it's being applied is actually very similar, except in a couple of cases. What's happened is because of coronavirus disease, governors of a number of states have pushed to expand mail-in absentee voting to in many cases have what's called, quote, no excuse absentee voting. Usually you have to say, well, I'm going to be out of town or I'm going to be out of the country or whatever, as the president who votes in Florida now says he always has to vote by absentee ballot because he's here in Washington, D.C. So what they're doing is they're expanding the idea of absentee ballots so that people can request an absentee ballot and it will be sent to them, but they don't have to have a particular excuse. But in some states like California, what they're doing is they're looking at the voter rolls and they're just automatically mailing out ballots to everybody who's on the voter roll. And that's where the president says you get into problems here because there are a lot of people who may be on those voter rolls who no longer live in the state, who might be deceased, but ballots are still going out to them as well. And he says that's where the potential for fraud and voting irregularities really pops up here. What the president is pointing to as well is problems with the mail system because of coronavirus disease. The mail is slower than it has been. He points to New York's congressional district, 12th congressional district, which is Carolyn Maloney's district. They had a primary election back on June the 23rd. And we're nowhere close to knowing who won that. And they're saying now that as many as 20% of the ballots in that primary may be thrown out. And in the Brooklyn part of that district, as many as 28% of those ballots may be thrown out. And the president is pointing to New York's 12th congressional district is saying that's a microcosm for what could happen across the country. The other thing the president was talking about as well were negotiations for a phase 4 coronavirus relief bill. At the daily briefing this morning, the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, came out to talk about where they were with the negotiations. He spent a long time with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer yesterday. He'll also be speaking with them tomorrow. He says that the White House put 4 offers on the table. All of those were rejected, and one of the offers they put on the table was for Martha McSally's proposal of a 1-week extension in the $600 enhanced unemployment insurance, which they says Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer rejected. So right now, the negotiations to fix things are nowhere. We'll see where they go over the weekend.
All right, John Roberts live at the White House. Thank you, John. A more peaceful night in Portland last night as Oregon State Police took over for federal agents guarding the federal courthouse that has been a flashpoint for violent demonstrations. William Lajeunesse is live in Portland with more on what's going on there now. Hi, William.
Well, Julie, what we don't know if last night was the exception or the rule. Basically, is Portland moving on? Or are we the kind of criminal types going to reemerge this weekend when it's easier to conceal their behavior from police? So basically, over the this is the longest running protest after the death of George Floyd. Demonstrators have destroyed property, they've provoked police, then federal agents, and they also hijacked that original message against racism and police violence. Last night, entirely different. Basically, protesters policed themselves. Black men and women stepped in to challenge the rioters. Speakers urged peace, and the majority went home on their own by midnight.
Well, I'm out here to protect people's civil liberties, to support the Black Lives Matter movement and LGBTQ and every movement that needs to be out here that needs to be protected.
So the cleanup of the adjacent park also helped. Police there confiscated a number of weapons, a sledgehammer, chains, walkie-talkies, a metal bat. Police have also stepped up their patrols. And then the protesters stayed off the fence last night. Also, there was no tear gas or pepper spray. Secretary DHS, Acting Secretary Chad Wolf, credits the local officials for doing the right thing.
After over 60 days, they've decided to step up and do their job. Unfortunately, within those 60 days, we've had over 240 DHS law enforcement officers injured because of the criminal and violent activity every night.
So I asked
Staff Mark Meadows held a briefing today attempting to blame Democrats who passed a bill in the House months ago to blame them for the current stalemate.
The Democrats believe that they have all the cards on their side, and they're willing to play those cards at the expense of those that are hurting. I want to stress that the Democrats have made 0 offers over the last 3 days. 0.
Joining me is the senior White House reporter for NBC News Digital, Shannon Pettypiece. Hey there, Shannon. So look, the president is going to a state where he's been down in the polls since the start of this pandemic. Tell us about his message today and sort of what the strategy is as we listen to Mark Meadows, where the strategy seems to be just blame the Democrats.
Well, Chris, first of all, I would note this is basically a campaign fundraising trip the president is taking. He has what is described as a campaign coalition event with sheriffs to start off with. He is then going to speak to supporters, which that often means donors, and then he's speaking at a fundraising committee. Now, you mentioned in there, in between, he has a meeting to talk about the coronavirus response and storm preparedness. Often, a lot of times, the White House will add in an official event to these fundraising campaign trips to help defray some of the costs. So then the costs get split basically between the White House and the campaign. But at this coronavirus event, as you mentioned, Florida is one of the hardest hit states at this point, where he is trailing in the polls. His advisors have clearly linked to him the drop in the polls with concerns over his handling of the coronavirus response. So going to Florida, talking about coronavirus is part of this broader strategy the White House has to try and make the president look like he's taking a leadership role when it comes to the coronavirus response. Because when you really think about it, until about 2 weeks ago when they started these coronavirus briefings again, the president was barely talking about coronavirus. He was mentioning it in passing and spending most of his attention focused on this issue of crime and the protests. He started talking about coronavirus a bit more. We now see him out traveling to these hardest hit states to try and present this appearance as a president who is taking control of this situation. But really, it's more an optic strategy shift to try and help him, as you mentioned, in these declining polls.
Shannon Pettypiece, always good to see you. Thank you for that. And a little...
Want to stop clogged, smelly...
And then for tomorrow, we'll have thicker clouds in the eastern South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa. And with the thicker cloud cover, there is that chance for a scattered shower or thunderstorm. Wind gusts for today, almost non-existent. We may get a couple of occasions where we have a wind up to 15 miles per hour. Otherwise, just expect light winds. Scattered showers in that forecast for tomorrow as that front moves through. We'll have stronger northerly winds for tomorrow as we could get a couple of these wind gusts into that 20 to near 30 mile per hour range. And then for Sunday, it looks like we'll have mostly sunny skies. and we still may have a couple of northerly winds come in at around 20 miles per hour. Forecast today showing temperatures in the 80s and 90s. Tonight will eventually fall to the 60s, and that 7-day forecast showing temperatures in the middle 70s Monday and Tuesday. As we slowly get out of that late next week, we introduce a chance for a scattered shower or thunderstorm. Aberdeen and northeastern South Dakota.
Safe for sensitive skin.
Only have that 20.
Call today. Appointments available now.
Expect. Neil gets insight from Senator Bill Cassidy, Saturday on Cavuto Live.
So, and it learns with you.
All the way down through splashdown, there are very key milestones that we have to go through that have to happen in sequence.
Oversight, not getting the backs of the taxpayer.
Lost to coronavirus in the last 24 hours. But now another threat is barreling toward Florida. A hurricane watch in effect for parts of the state as the second hurricane of the Atlantic season bears down on the Bahamas. Let's go to CNN's Randy Kay. She's in Palm Beach County, Florida for us. Tell us, Randy, how the state is preparing for the storm now in the midst of the coronavirus outbreak.
Hi, Brianna. I mean, just imagine preparing as we're getting word that we have more than 9,000 new cases today. Still, more than 6,800 Floridians have lost their lives, and 8,400 are still in the hospital here. And now we have this hurricane barreling toward Florida. It is supposed to arrive at some point tonight, we believe. We were in a tropical storm watch zone. Now we are in a hurricane watch zone. So we are really going from bad to worse here. And the question is, how do you deal with a hurricane, as you said, in the middle of a pandemic? How do you social distance? How do you evacuate? We know that FEMA has been checking with their teams to make sure that they have enough PPE. But in the meantime, we have the state-run testing sites where they've been testing people for COVID. Most of those have shut down. They've reopened on the West Coast because of the track of the storm has changed. But still, so many here in Palm Beach County. 8 of them have closed here. 13 have closed in the hardest hit county of Miami-Dade. In all, in the 3 hardest hit counties, we have 33 state-run testing sites that have closed, including Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade, and Broward County. But Brianna, the governor held a press conference just a short time ago, and he did give an update. He said that they have enough supplies, and let me just give you some of the list that he read off. He said they have PPE reserved, they have 20 million masks, 22 million gloves, 1.6 million face shields, 20,000 thermometers, 9.4 million bottles of water, and 2.6 million meals ready to go as well.
A lot of tips for her. A lot of them will be about how life on space station goes. I think that's been the thing that's been more unique rather than the capsule itself. I think that's probably where I'll have the most to share with her. But I'll definitely have some advice about living inside of Dragon and where best to pack all your personal items so that you can get to them conveniently. Because if you, just like any trip that you make, if you pack things appropriately, it can be a very fun trip. If you pack everything at the bottom of the big van that you take when you go on vacation, and you got to get it all out one item at a time at various times, it can be tiring and can eat into your enjoyment on the trip. And so I'll definitely have some tips for her, but it'll be hard to tampen out all the excitement that she has with any suggestions I have.
All right, now we have Joy Roulette from Reuters.
For doing this, what about the process of returning do you and the SpaceX team wish you had more information on? And earlier it was said that you'll have the appropriate hardware ready in case you guys get sick. Is that something as simple as a paper bag, or does Crew Dragon have, or the flight suits, do they have some kind of actual hardware for anticipating sickness? Thanks.
I didn't get your first question, but I certainly can answer your second one. The appropriate hardware, just like on an airliner, there are bags if you need them, and we'll have those handy. We'll probably have some towels handy as well. And if that needs to happen, it certainly wouldn't be the first time that that's happened in a space vehicle. It will be the first time in this particular vehicle if we do, but
not the first time by any stretch. As folks that fly in space know, that sometimes going uphill can be a little bit have an effect on your system, and sometimes coming downhill is the same way. So we'll just have to see how it goes, and we'll certainly let you know. What was your first question again?
The first question was, what about the process of returning do you and the SpaceX team wish you had more information on?
Yeah, I think, the biggest challenge, and it was that way with shuttle, is just the weather that we need in order to return home. Shuttle had some fairly significant weather criteria relative to Dragon, their capsule vehicle, but we still have weather to deal with. And of course, anybody who's lived on the Gulf Coast or anywhere in the south along the coast in the United States knows that August and September are tough months to deal with the hurricanes that always tend to crop up, and 2020 seems to be a pretty active year by all accounts. So I think the biggest thing we'd all like to know is just the weather. But as with any tropical system, they're, even with today's technology, somewhat unpredictable. They wobble, they move, the center moves. And you have fronts that affect them and where they go, and that obviously has an effect on our landing areas. So if anything, just we'd like to be able to predict the weather a little bit better than we can, but we have some of the best people in the business working on this for us. And
Score 28. Will be voting by mail than those who will be voting in person for sure with the threat of coronavirus. How do you make sure that at the end of the day, it's all legit?
Well, first, it's all about making data-driven decisions. They aren't partisan or furthering any particular agenda. Just looking at what the data shows about how to secure our elections. Now, here in Michigan, just as in many other states, we have a signature process that ensures before you even get a ballot, you have to request it. That signature on your request form matches the signature on your voter registration. And then when you get your ballot and return it, you have to sign the outside of the envelope, and that signature has to match everything we have on file. So we've got multiple levels of security checks. We've got people working overtime to be prepared to process those ballots and ensure they're counted as effectively and efficiently as possible. So we've got this. We've got the provisions in place, and we've done, and many other states have done this for years. But let's underscore what's really happening here. What this is really an attempt to do is sow seeds of doubt among our electorate about the sanctity of the process, and really set the stage for the potential rejection of otherwise accurate results later this year. And I think that's what we're all particularly concerned about, but at the same time, we're all laser focused on just making sure that every citizen can vote, every vote is counted, and every voice is heard this November.
Climate solutions. While me...
Whitman.
You see a chipped or cracked windshield.
He was trying to work the edges of the plate, and he was trying to force hitters to hit his pitches. Now it just looks like he says, here it is. This is my stuff. I know it's good. See if you can hit it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I don't think you can hit what I've got. Prove me wrong, and he's just seems so much more both confident out there, but calm too.
Yeah, poised and yeah. I think when you're given something to work on, somebody tells you this is what's going to work for you, and then it does. You just feel.
Thank you very much, Tyler. World News Tonight is next here on KSFY.
Dakota News Now continues in 2 minutes over on KDLT. Hope to see you over there. For now, good night from Courthouse Square.
When you think of a bank, you think of people.
Return to eastern South Dakota near Brandon, racing at Houston Speedway.
Sunday's races will mark the first since 2017. KELO's Dan Santella looks ahead to the big day.
We're now just a little over 48 hours away from the roar of engines returning here.
People are all bumped up in Sioux Falls and Minnesota, Iowa, Wyoming. I mean, I've had people from Wyoming and Iowa calling me wanting tickets, but I'm just an old retired flagman now.
Doug Clark is a fan, sure, but the man knows his racing.
But I'm into the Knoxville Hall of Fame, Houston's Hall of Fame, the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame, and now Fairmont, Minnesota.
Even if you're not in multiple Hall of Fames, Sunday is reason to celebrate for the local racing community. Sprint car racer Sam Henderson from T will be racing here Sunday night.
I'm really excited to come here and race. Hopefully, every race for the rest of the year would be awesome.
He and many others are already familiar with the racing tradition here.
Been here about every Sunday night for my entire life until the point where it closed, and I'm just really excited to see it open again. It's like a tradition, This track is known for Sunday nights.
In Sioux Falls, Dan Santel, KELO News.
Races start at 8 o'clock on Sunday. Tickets are currently on sale online.
And one last look at weather. Here's Jay.
All right, thunderstorm now coming through Eagle Butte, as you can see. Tomorrow might be a couple showers here in eastern Caroline. Otherwise, a north.
Emergency management, they said that they do have shelters ready to go, but they have not opened any yet. They have advised the counties that if they do open them, they want them to be fewer than 50 people inside. They want temperature checks to take place as well, and they want to have 60 square feet per person. I also just got off the phone before coming.
Kept somewhat of a public profile as a political commentator, but others have virtually disappeared. Beto O'Rourke, Pete Buttigieg, Tom Steyer, and Michael Bloomberg were well-funded Democrats with some initial sizzle, who then fizzled.
But also confronting social problems, changing the whole environment.
I took my social workers hard to that job. I quickly realized that we could not arrest our way out of some of the challenges in our communities, that we had a direct obligation.
Line looming, more than 25 million Americans will lose critical unemployment aid at midnight as Congress goes home for the weekend without reaching a deal. Is the Ellen Show over? After allegations of racism and a toxic work environment on her show, why Ellen is apologizing and reportedly threatening to quit. Unfounded attacks on mail-in voting. The president continues to undermine the long-standing practice of voting by mail. Growing concerns that the U.S. Postal Service, led by one of President Trump's biggest donors, is slowing mail service.
Is that mail is backing up, is getting delayed.
Democrats tonight accuse President Trump of undermining democracy. Bitcoin bust. Tonight, Florida authorities arrest the mastermind behind that Twitter attack of 130 accounts, including President Obama, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. Turns out he's 17 years old. And tonight, CBS's Steve Hartman is on the road with a local businessman who's helping send 75 kids to college.
The daring jailbreak in a major American city. Inmates tying together bed sheets to escape from the 12th floor. One of them, accused of first-degree murder, getting away. Tonight, the update from authorities.
This is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
And good evening. Thank you for joining us on a Friday night. I'm Tom Yamas, in for David. And we begin tonight with the state of emergency in Florida. A life-threatening storm in the middle of a life-threatening pandemic. Hurricane Isaias targeting the coast, a Cat 1 with winds of up to 75 miles per hour. The deadly storm causing flooding and mudslides, knocking out power to hundreds of thousands in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. The hurricane now taking aim at the Bahamas with wind and rain. Hurricane hunters flying over the eye of the hurricane today. Watches and warnings posted in Florida. The state closing some coronavirus testing sites until at least Tuesday. It could hit or come close to hitting Florida this weekend. Here's the track, moving its way up the East Coast. North Carolina already issuing mandatory evacuation orders for parts of the Outer Banks. ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano is in Miami to lead us off tonight.
Tonight, after pummeling the Caribbean, the entire East Coast on alert. Hurricane Isaias gaining strength. Now taking aim at the epicenter for coronavirus cases, Florida.
They just signed an executive order to declare a state of emergency in every coastal county of Florida's East Coast.
Florida residents racing to prepare.
When you got a trailer, you got to be concerned about everything.
The coming storm also forcing coronavirus testing sites in the storm's path to close down.
Our sites, because they're outdoors with tents,
if it were to get 40, 50 mile an hour winds, it would just collapse.
Isaias was still a tropical storm when it slammed the Caribbean, killing at least 2 on the Dominican Republic, including a 5-year-old boy, flooding neighborhoods.
Forward by Republicans on the Hill with several.
Just south of Daytona. That's the hurricane warning, and it's not 36 hours from now. It's more like 24, 27, 30 hours from now when the winds of tropical storm force could first start arriving. And I want people to be sheltering for wind, Mike. Mobile homes, you don't want to be in them. And we could experience power outages. Don't run those generators indoors. Don't use candles. Stay away from down power lines.
Everything that we need to be abiding by. Dr. Knapp, thank you so much for that. We've got a lot more to come here on
some hope, telling lawmakers he is cautiously optimistic that there could be a vaccine by the end of this year.
I don't think that they will have everybody getting it immediately in the beginning. It probably will be phased in.
Testing czar Admiral Brett GIROIR admitted that the nation was not meeting the benchmark for testing, and he urged Americans to take responsibility for keeping themselves safe.
We cannot test our way out of this or any other pandemic. Testing does not replace personal responsibility.
Today, the National Institutes of Health announced they are ramping up, investing nearly $250 million in new technologies, which they say will significantly increase COVID-19 testing by millions per week. It can't come soon enough as coronavirus cases continue to climb around the country. Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Missouri, and Connecticut have all seen their average new cases soar. There are new worries about COVID and kids. A new report released today by the CDC details an outbreak at a Georgia sleepaway camp. It happened last month where 260 children and staff tested positive less than a week after spending time together. This comes as states are grappling with safely reopening schools. In Utah, students will be allowed to go to school even if they've been directly exposed to the virus, as long as they don't show symptoms. But in New York, officials say schools will only reopen if new COVID infections stay below 3%. Back in hard-hit Florida,
I'm hoping that the hurricane stays offshore. Right now, we're anticipating some tropical storm conditions.
Look, hurricane season is already well ahead of normal in terms of how many storms there have been. Tonight, behind Isaias, there are 2 more storms that are forming. And I have to tell you, with Florida hemorrhaging resources related to the pandemic, nor the last thing people in Florida want to hear about is a hurricane.
Yeah, I understand that. David Begnaud, thank you. Well, tonight it's not just Florida, but much of the East Coast that is nervously watching the track of this hurricane.
These courses we have available, $40 a credit hour, basically 25% of the cost of getting this education almost anywhere else. It's a tremendous opportunity.
Now those classes will be available when the fall term starts on August 24th. From here, Austin Goss, Dakota News Now.
Still ahead, it should be a good weekend to spend some time outdoors. You can also do some good at the same time. We'll explain. Tyler?
Hey there, Carlene. Showers and thunderstorms moving through right now.
Dreaming, Congresswoman, I believe it's a reality and will be shown to be a reality.
2 vaccines are now in the final stage of testing in the United States. Dr. Victoria Smith with Ochsner Health in Louisiana is volunteering for Pfizer's vaccine.
I've lost 3 patients to COVID. I have a large African American and Latino patient population who's been disproportionately affected by COVID. And so a vaccine is really what offers some hope to try to end, so much of the suffering.
Latinos make up more than half the cases in California, the state approaching 500,000 cases now. And now growing concern about those states north of the Sun Belt, like Idaho, which saw record deaths this week. ICU nurse Krista Murphy is tired of hearing people saying that they don't want to wear a mask.
Makes me feel awful. Like they don't care about what we're going through here. They don't care about the people that are admitted to the hospital, whose families can't come and see them and are terrified.
In New Jersey, transmission rates are now higher than they were in April.
Look, the numbers are setting off alarms that we are taking and we take very seriously.
Police there are looking for a woman at this Staples store who they say assaulted a liver transplant patient allegedly over a mask. The suspect grabbing the victim's cane, throwing that woman to the ground, breaking her leg, all because she was asked to wear a mask. And tonight, the challenge for so many schools trying to safely reopen. Today in Georgia, the first wave of students back in school with new safety rules, but masks are not required.
I have full confidence that they have put in all the right protocols.
It comes as a new CDC report raises concerns about the risks. At one Georgia sleepaway camp where cloth masks were not worn by campers, the virus spread to more than 44% of campers and staff within a week. Now the future of baseball is in question. Sources telling ESPN the commissioner of Major League Baseball is warning players the season could be shut down if the sport doesn't do a better job of managing the virus after 20 members of the Miami Marlins were infected, along with a few members of the Cardinals and Phillies.
What could be a major development for baseball right there. Victor joins us now outside of a testing center that's closed because of the impending storm. Victor, I want to go back to the issue of schools. The nation's largest district, New York City, outlining its reopening plan today. Tom, they'll be taking what the mayor is calling a blended approach of both in-person and online classes, but it is all about the numbers. If that infection rate goes above 3%, the city will close the schools and they'll transition to online learning. Tom, 3%, the big number tonight. All right, Victor, thank you for that. We move on now to the deadly military training disaster off San Diego. The search and rescue underway. At least one Marine dead, 8 still missing. Their amphibious vehicle taking on water. The Marines were based at Camp Pendleton. ABC's Will Carr has been following this all day.
Tonight, the military training disaster aboard an amphibious assault vehicle. 1 Marine is dead, 2 are in critical condition, 8 more are still missing as officials are in a desperate search and rescue operation. The Marines based at Camp Pendleton were training off the Navy-owned island of San Clemente, about 65 miles from San Diego. The exercise took a catastrophic turn at 5:45 p.m. Thursday. Emergency reports that the armored personnel carrier was taking on water. Rescue crews searching in choppy seas, finding 8 people.
This vehicle is big. It's almost as big and heavy as a tank. And so when water gets aboard, it sinks very quickly.
15 Marines and 1 sailor were inside the vehicle. The military has used these vehicles since the 1970s to transport Marines from sea to land. The Coast Guard and the Navy are now searching in the water and by helicopter for the missing crew members.
There have been mishaps in these amphibious vehicles over the years, but none like this. Did hatches get open that shouldn't have been open and allowed seawater to quickly get in? Was there a mechanical failure?
As the search continues tonight, the Marines have decided to stop using that vehicle on water until they can figure out exactly what went tragically wrong. Tom, Will Carr for us on that breaking news. Will, thank you.
A follow-up to a story we brought you earlier this week. Thanks to your help, the Dairy Queen in Madison sold over 30,000 Blizzard coupons for the Children's Miracle Network. Now, as we told you, Miracle Treat Day was canceled nationwide because of the pandemic, but stores in South Dakota were allowed to raise money through an event called South Dakota Sweet Miracles. Every year, that Madison store is among the top Blizzard sellers in the entire nation on Miracle Treat Day. Good deal for them. Good deal for us right now. Otherwise, things might be a little
like this as far as the case numbers. They've reached somewhat of a plateau. Our positivity number that we look at all the time is actually slightly down this past week, so we're very happy about that. One of our earliest indicators.
And I don't mince words. CBS News has learned that after assuming his position last month, DeJoy forced cost-cutting measures leading to undelivered mail piling up at post offices across the country. And CBS News confirmed this internal Postal Service directive that outlines an operational pivot, saying extra trips to deliver mail are no longer authorized, and that we may see mail left behind or mail on the workroom floor or docks, which is not typical.
Mail is backing up, is getting delayed.
Mark Dimmenstein is president of the American Postal Workers Union.
We're being demanded in one way or another with these new policies to delay mail. That's against everything we stand for.
The Postal Service has struggled financially for years and lost $9 billion last year alone.
The Postal Service is a joke.
Postmaster General DeJoy declined our request for an interview, but in a statement, the Postal Service says it is in a financially unsustainable position, and despite any assertions to the contrary, we are not slowing down election mail or any other mail. Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi accused President Trump of trying to delegitimize the election.
He wants to cancel the election or postpone the election. Really? Did he learn that from Putin or something? They want to diminish the capacity of the postal system to work in a timely fashion.
Today, White House senior advisor Stephen Miller railed against mail-in ballots here at the White House. He said nobody who mails in a ballot has their identity confirmed. That is just not true. States have several safeguards in place to prevent fraud, including signature analysis and barcodes on the ballots. And Nora, overall, mail-in voting fraud is very rare.
Some important fact checks. Ben Tracy, thank you. Tonight, there are reports the Ellen DeGeneres show may be coming to an end. There are accusations of racism and sexual misconduct behind the scenes. And tonight, Ellen is responding. Here's CBS's Jamie Yukas.
I'm happy. I'm very excited. The latest accusations from former Ellen Show staffers have struck at the heart of the 17-year-old show's happy persona.
When I say be kind to one another, I really mean it.
Dozens and dozens of former employees shared experiences and stories about what they call a culture of sexual harassment and misconduct.
Christy Andoli broke the story on BuzzFeed News, interviewing nearly 50 former employees. Some accused executives of sexual harassment. Others described a culture of fear and intimidation, all taking place when DeGeneres was not around. One said, "We're young people who were forming our careers and were unfortunately subjected to a toxic work environment." In an email to staff, DeGeneres wrote, "I've not been able to stay on top of everything and relied on others to do their jobs as they knew I'd want them done. Clearly, some didn't." But in a tweet, Everybody Loves Raymond actor Brad Garrett said, "Sorry, but it comes from the top."
She should know what's happening. So for Ellen to not know, they say there's a level of active ignorance.
Former co-workers tell us they are encouraging DeGeneres to leave the show. The 3 accused executives deny the allegations. Warner Media, which distributes the program, is investigating and says they're implementing staff changes. Nora? Jamie Yukas, thank you. There is still much more news ahead on.
This can be effective.
Discourage people from voting, even undermining the Postal Service in the run-up to an election that's going to be dependent on mail-in ballots so people don't get sick.
The White House is out with a statement calling those changes in the Postal Service much needed and long overdue, and saying that the suggestion there were politics involved is, quote, baseless and absurd. The reality here, if the mail slows down, it'll take longer to count the votes, and the results may not be known for a while. That's happened several times before, and the country did just fine. Tom? Terry Moran for us tonight. Terry, thank you. Next, news in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Court documents released late last night reveal Maxwell was in contact with longtime companion and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein as late as 2015, despite her claims they hadn't spoken in a decade, including one email where Epstein urged her to, quote, go to parties, telling her she did nothing wrong. Maxwell remains in custody in Brooklyn after her arrest at a remote New Hampshire mansion. She denies allegations she helped groom some of Epstein's victims. And when we come back on this Friday night, the dramatic jailbreak playing out today.
Sunday morning futures, inside challenges with China, the potential threat, and the administration's next steps. The exclusive interview Sunday.
Are you?
Don't.
This looks like a bottle of vodka. When we first got these, we were like,
And I thank you for your leadership, and I remember your speech, and I very much agree with those areas of focus.
When there were 0 reported cases in the United States on January 6th, the CDC issued Wuhan travel notice before any U.S. confirmed.
That much, even with his insurance.
The 70s for highs for the beginning of August, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Morning lows in the 50s. Really, we've talked about this a lot, but I mean, that's going to be really great to finally turn off those ACs for a while. In Aberdeen, the next 10 days.
My lung removed. My tip is, if smoking doesn't get you one way, it'll get you another.
You could quit. For free help, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW.
T-Mobile and Sprint have merged. Now that Sprint is a part of T-Mobile, we have more towers, more engineers, and more coverage than ever before. And now you can get an awesome network at an amazing price. Get 4 lines of unlimited for just $25 a line with 5G access included. That's right, unlimited and nationwide 5G for just $25 per line, only at T-Mobile.
Alice loves the scent of gain so much, she wished there was a way to make it last longer. Say hello to your fairy godmother, Alice. and long-lasting Gain scent beads, part of the irresistible scent collection from Gain.
The Capital One Walmart Rewards Card puts cash back in your wallet. Earn 5% cash back on everything you buy at walmart.com.
Paper towels!
Including things for the science fair.
What's in your wallet?
Dateline Friday, The Danger Within.
You can see the bullet holes in the wall.
She fought for her life.
The X-rated clue that led to a killer.
I still can't wrap my head around it.
Dateline Friday, 9/8 Central.
3, 2, 1. Cannonball!
It's the biggest, wettest, wildest water competition ever.
Mike the Miz Mizanin hosts Cannonball.
Flop it like it's hot.
Sunday on NBC.
As researchers across the globe race to develop a vaccine, there's one group with a bold plan to get billions of doses to every corner of the planet. Richard Engel reports.
As the U.S. and Europe scramble to secure vaccines even before they're fully tested and ready, concerns are growing tonight about a coming free-for-all, with rich countries gobbling up supply. And virologists warn unilateral approaches won't work, that unless the world is immunized, the virus will keep coming back.
If the goal is to really end the pandemic, you have to take a global view.
Seth Berkley is the CEO of a group called Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines, responsible for vaccinating 60% of the world's children. Gavi's ambitious plan, in coordination with the World Health Organization, is to secure deals with drug companies for 2 billion doses of a variety of vaccines and distribute them more equitably around the world, concentrating first where infection spreads the most, among doctors and nurses. Gavi hopes immunizing a targeted 20% of the entire planet will break the pandemic's back.
Even if a country has access to vaccines, if it wants to go back to normal, if it wants to have trade, if it wants to have tourism, if it wants to have an ability to move around, it can't have large reservoirs of virus in other countries.
More than 160 nations have signed on to Gavi's global vaccine initiative, with one notable absence: the United States, though talks are ongoing.
How troubling is it to you that President Trump and his administration aren't buying into this?
Let's see how that goes. My suspicion is that the U.S. at the end will pay attention to the global issues, because I think at the end that will prevail.
Gavi says its goal is to push out 2 billion vaccine doses by the end of 2021. Lester?
Richard Engel, thanks. Up next, an emotional send-off for an American hero.
Your home is the address of your memories. It's always looking after you. But your home.
One pill, once a day treatment used for HIV.
Days before a lot of people start seeing ballots come in the mail. So it makes sense that a newly minted campaign manager stepping up from the deputy role would want to look at things and take inventory and figure out where we want to move with some targeting strategic messaging. So that's exactly what we're doing. And so he pulls them for a few days. I know the DC chattering class and the Beltway bureaucrats and political pundits care so much about that, but who cares? No big deal. We're going up full force with some targeted ad buys the first part of next week, and they're really going to show the difference. Elections are about choices, and when our ads go up, you're going to see Joe Biden's 50-year failed career in elected office, but also that he is an empty vessel being filled by the socialist wing of his party, the Ilhan Omars, the Rashida Tlaibs, the Bernie Sanders, and they're the ones that are actually pulling him that direction. He's now embraced it, wanting to remake America. Some of the plans he's putting out aren't American at all. They read more like a socialist manifesto. And so if the ad campaign you're going to see will absolutely highlight that and point out how successful Donald Trump has been and what a failure Joe Biden
If I'm clear on this, Hogan, what you're saying is they're going to back away from the whole law and order campaign advertising thing, and they're going to go on to, you know what, Joe Biden is being, you know, drifting and being drawn farther to the left. Let me just put up the president's tweet from earlier, if I can, and I'll get your reaction to that. We just got 50% in Rasmussen and much higher in our internal polls. We are doing a new ad campaign on Sleepy Joe Biden that will be out on Monday. He has been brought even further left than crazy Bernie Sanders ever thought possible. By the way, Bernie's people love me on trade. So little insight is, you know what, we're going to go after a new thing that Joe Biden is being taken.
watching, Jim Jordan and Louis Gohmert and the usual guys jumping around with, bells on their caps, when in fact the person we ought to be watching is William Barr, the Attorney General, who at this point is acting pretty much as an acting president and kind of super empowered interior minister. But emotionally and mentally, Donald Trump's gone bye-bye. The guy that can actually issue orders and really cause some serious problems here when things get down to the wire, it's going to be the Attorney General, the person who's supposed to be the ultimate guarantor of the Constitution, but who's acting like a consigliere for a mob boss. And I think we shouldn't get distracted by too much of the clownacy that's going on and some of the threats that Trump can't carry out. We need to be looking at the people who actually are competent and are quietly trying to undo the foundations of our government.
Yeah, very well said. Tom Nichols, Masha Gessen, thank you both. Really appreciate you both.
To learn about soil and bugs. Experience weather changes in 4D. Learn about biofuel and animal feed and more. Become a member for as low as $5.99 a month and visit our museums as often as you want. Experience your Washington Pavilion today.
At Empire Car Wash by Silver Star, we do it for you. When you want us to vacuum the inside of your vehicle, clean your windows, towel dry your car, wipe down the dashboard, seats, and cup holders, let Empire Car Wash by Silver Star do it for you. Plus, we sanitize your vehicle at no additional charge. Empire Car Wash by Silver Star in front of Costco. A better wash, a great feeling.
Here's your chance to experience the Sioux Empire Fair to the fullest. The Super Pass is your ticket to experience everything the Sioux Empire Fair has to offer. This includes your daily admission along with access to concerts, rodeos, and unlimited carnival rides every day. Available for only $70. Your good everyday Super Pass is only available at Sioux Falls and Brandon area Lewis drugstores. They're only available through August 5th. So you better hurry to get your Super Pass for the 81st annual Sioux Empire Fair.
Why is July one of the best times to shop?